Attack on Titan has finally come to an end, and the anime sparkled a huge amount of positive reactions from fans all over the globe. It's no surprise to see that this phenomenon created by Isayama ignited a spark that would last for so many years. However, this was not always the case. For a little bit of context, I've been a fan of Attack on Titan ever since it was released, at least when the anime came out, and I was one of those people who waited years until the second season came out. Since I could not wait, I decided to check the manga and stay up to date ever since. I will be talking about major spoilers in this video, so please be cautious if you don't want to be spoiled. The moment I started to catch up was immediately after Annie was captured and the colossal titan's face is revealed to be inside the wall. Ever since then, I was surprised by every single twist in the story. That includes the betrayal of Bertolt and Reiner, Ymir being a titan shifter, the Reyes family origin, the secret of Marley in Grish's diary, and even the ending of the series. I will admit that the pacing was done much better here and there in the anime in my opinion, but when the final chapter was released, there was a massive negative backlash on the internet. And when I say negative one, I'm talking about a dogma of people refusing to accept that others love the ending. Harassment, insults, public shaming, you name it. And this is no exaggeration either. People looking down on others for not having the same exact opinion on the ending of this show, claiming that Eren's character was ruined, the story made absolutely no sense, the plot led to nowhere, and that we have waited years for absolutely nothing. Which is wrong. And that's not an opinion, that's a fact. Yes, I am planting my foot here, because after seeing anime-only viewers' reaction, I was able to see I wasn't wrong. The ending made perfect sense for being tragic with just a tiny bit of hope induced. But to explain myself a bit better, we need to talk about a lot of things. The ending shows Mikasa killing Eren, making all the titans disappear, and him being buried under the tree where he used to take naps when he was a kid. The world lost 80% of its population. Paradis rises as the ultimate nation, and it's up to the heroes of this story to spread the word of peace, both inside and outside of Paradis. After that, we see what could be a representation of Eren as a dove picking up Mikasa's scarf and wrapping it around her neck, like he did when he was a kid. Then the credits roll. We see Mikasa growing old and keeping the scarf with her until the last day. Then we see Paradis living in harmony for hundreds, if not thousands of years, until war erupts again and Paradis gets destroyed, only to show the giant tree where Eren was buried turning into a familiar tree that we have seen before, with a little kid about to enter it, leaving it to the interpretation if the events will happen again. Of course, I am omitting a lot of details like Ymir's motivation, Eren's conversation with Armin and others, but I'll get to those in a moment because they are part of this analysis. There is something that I agree with the haters of the ending though, and that's the fact that the manga is not very good at explaining this ending. For example, the panels of Ymir's alternative timeline were not shown in the original release, but a month later instead. The panels of Mikasa growing old, Paradis living peacefully for years, and the kid happened to have the same issue. And that's not all. In the anime, the technological advancements are way superior to the manga counterpart, showing prosperity for thousands of years, where in the manga it shows what could be seen as simply decades. The message still remains the same though. No matter how much peace you bring to the world, humanity is doomed to repeat the same cycle over and over again. But wait, there's the key word that's so important for this analysis: cycle. For me to make sense of this analysis, I'll address the event that most people hated the most: Eren crying for Mikasa. A lot of people hated the fact that Eren became so fragile and emotional during his final conversation with Armin, in which he mentions that he doesn't want Mikasa to be with another man and wants her to love him and even mourn him for at least 10 years, being called simp, beta, even disappointing. What people seem to forget is that this was intentional. Even Armin says both in the anime and the manga, "I was not expecting you to say something so pathetic." But here's the interesting thing. Armin was truly not expecting that. We have seen Armin using his teasing ability to get a reaction from people. We first see this when he teases Berthold, telling him that Annie was being tortured because Armin knew that this would bring a reaction out of him, and when Berthold snaps, his plan to become vulnerable works. Of course, Armin tries this tactic again in the second part of Season 3, but Berthold shows superiority, making sure that he will not make the same mistake twice, and this throws Armin's guard off. In the case of Eren, we have never seen Armin teasing him before, so this is the first time he does something like this to him. Perhaps Armin was expecting Eren to apologize to Mikasa or to say something remorseful, but was not expecting Eren to open up so much and to start crying. Keep in mind that this is the first time Eren truly breaks down like a baby in front of Armin, especially with such a weird thing as liking someone, compared to when Armin dies but ends up becoming a new colossal titan shifter. And even then, Armin never saw Eren crying, just relieved that Armin was okay. But seeing Eren like this truly throws him off guard and can't help but to be fully transparent and say what everybody thought at that moment. That's pathetic, and it was intentional. Before this, we saw the conversation between him and Mikasa, where he asked her to throw the scarf away and to forget about him because he truly wants her to be happy. This was not a lie, he even mentions it before and after. However, it seems that Eren is actually being a bit too infantile in this situation, which of course makes sense as well, and this is where the discussion turns into a different issue now. A lot of the haters of the ending think that this broke Eren's character development we have seen in the 4th season. He is no longer calculating, meticulous or serious. He's just a baby, which leads me to think, are you sure about that? Many chapters prior to this moment, we have seen Eren crying after saving Ramsay from the thugs in Marley. We've also seen Eren mentally breaking down after Sasha's death. We have seen him sad after discovering the sea. Even after seeing Mikasa with an ice cream, he's always gloomy and depressed. What happened? This has a bit of personal interpretation of mine, but the rest is purely analytical based on what we see in the story. All of this happens when Eren kisses Historia's hand, where he manages to see his past, present and future at the same time, thanks to the connection of the race's royal blood in contact with the founding titan. At this very precise moment, Eren sees his future, his past and how everything turned out to be. And this is where I think Isayama made a genius move when creating these characters. Eren was only 15 years old when he saw all of this. Think about it. This Eren you see crying on the floor is the same Eren that kissed the Queen's hand and saw the unstoppable doom in a literal flash before his eyes. Eren never grew up because he never had the chance to. How can you become mature if your life literally flashes before your eyes? And what's more important, we have an important piece of information as well. Eren confesses to Armin that during these 4 years he's been trying to change these events over and over with no avail. That every event turned out to be the same every single time, which leads me to my next point. To explain this point, I would like to use 3 other pieces of media that deal with timely events. These are Loki, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and Doc. The 3 of these rely on very complicated analysis of time travel concepts illustrated in different forms. Call them canonical events if you want to make it simple. Canonical events are those events that are written and will happen no matter what. In the case of Loki, in a very brief summary, a lot of events are being controlled by an entity called He Who Remains, who planned every single detail to happen in a specific order for the 2 variants of Loki to reach the end of time. He Who Remains explains to the protagonist that in this timeline he's structured, he knows that his own death is imminent and thus he can only predict what happens until this moment, and that his death will result in the branching timelines. This means that in a timeline where you are wearing a red shirt, there's another one where you are wearing a blue one. The concept seems very simple in theory, but apply it to impactful and devastating events in the millions of timelines and the results can be catastrophic. Still, no matter how many branches there is one canonical event, meaning an event that can't be changed, in which he who remains dies in the end. In the second season of the show, we see that in order to fix the branches, they need to go back to a non-existent dimension where time and space don't exist to prevent this from happening. Quite complicated, I know, but bear with me. But when the heroes attempt to do this, it only results in the same events happening, leading to the death of he who remains. Meaning that his plan was to create an eternal cycle that never ends. This implies the Ouroboros effect, which is represented as a snake eating itself, representing unity and the natural eternal cycle of destruction and recreation. In conclusion, by trying to change any event in the middle, all the events will end up happening over and over again. This is also applied in the show Dog, where Jonas discovers that his father, who committed self-deletion, was actually Mikkel Nielsen, the son of Ulrich and Katarina, who disappeared in his present time and was later sent to the 1980s, where he grew up and became in the future Jonas' father. When Jonas understands this cycle, an event happens where Jonas understands that for this timeline to work, Mikkel had to travel in time, had to grow old, and had to become Jonas' father. If he prevented that from happening, Jonas wouldn't be born and his intervention of the canon event wouldn't happen and a paradox would occur. Therefore, this canon event could not be prevented. I know this is complicated, but it will make sense here, trust me. In the case of Across the Spider-Verse, the Spider Association explains to Miles that every single Spider-Man has to go through traumatic events or their dimension would collapse. In here, these are called canon events, which have to exist because otherwise it would branch into other timelines and destroy universes. With this, Miles fights against the concept of not being able to prevent a tragedy for the sake of saving millions, erasing that way his essence of making your own destiny. With that said, we have seen 3 examples of canonical events with eternal cycles that repeat over and over again with different interpretations and resolutions. But in the case of Attack on Titan, it's a bit different. You see, in these 3 shows, we see some sort of resolution or conflict to this paradox one way or the other, but time traveling in Attack on Titan follows the same guideline as the premise of the show: pure cruelty. There is no resolution, no way to change it, and no way to find a better outcome. Some events had to happen. These events were: Carla, Eren's mother, had to die while Berthold had to survive. Eren had to start the rumbling by joining his body with Ymir, and Sasha's death had to happen. But that begs the question, if Eren was able to change his father's past by convincing him to kill the Race family, why couldn't he change the death of his mother and thus create a different timeline? Well, that's because the Race's family was Grisha's canon event and had to happen. The same thing with Carla's death. Had Eren prevented his mother's death, he would not have the power to change the past and a paradox would occur. The same concept applied in Dark, like I mentioned before, the eternal cycle explained in Loki and the canon events in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. The Ouroboros effect taking place. The moment Eren knew about Sasha's death, he had the same exact reaction he had when Hans was killed by the Smiling Titan in Season 2. Eren breaks down assuming he is useless, that he can't save anyone and that his actions mean nothing. Same with Sasha's death. He saw her death, just like many other events he tried to change, but could not. That's why it's so important to keep in mind Eren's conversation with Reiner under the basement during the Tiber's exposition. Eren understands Reiner and feels they are the same. None of them could change a thing and have to carry their sins to the day they die. When Sasha died, he was 100% certain that he could not change a single thing, and the outcome would always be the same. He was destined to commit that atrocity, which is explained in his past. When Eren saved Mikasa from the kidnappers, we can see that Eren has always been a boy driven purely by violence and an unrealistic way of survival and thirst for freedom, where nothing and nobody would stand in his way. By the time he acquired the Titan powers from Grisha, his fate was sealed because that's who he was destined to become, an impotent boy with thirst for freedom, willing to kill anyone even if he wanted to change his mind in the future. But a lot of people also complained about other details from the ending, such as the death of the parasite from the founding Titan, which leads me to the next point. In Ymir's backstory, we see how she became a Titan by falling into the tree and being fused with this millipede-looking parasite that attaches to her and giving her the founding Titan powers. This power has been passed down in generations, creating the birth of the other Titans. If the parasite was separated from Eren, why did it die when Eren died? Why could it not be attached to another host? The reason is this. Why didn't this parasite crawl out from the tree to fuse with another human? Why did it wait for Ymir? My explanation is that the parasite could only survive under certain conditions, and the moment it found a host, it hibernated until it adapted to the human form. Since the founding Titan power could only be obtained by being passed, consuming the spine of a previous owner, it means that it could not simply fuse by its own. Just like parasites in real life, these need to be consumed in order to live inside of a host or to adapt to a new body. In this case, after centuries of being passed from one holder to another, the parasite could only live inside a host that it was used to or that it was attached to. When Jon explodes Eren's neck, we don't see the parasite trying to take Reiner or any human. It tries to get back in its shell. But that still doesn't explain everything. Why is the parasite related to Ymir in any way? Well, when Eren fuses with Ymir in the past, Eren releases her from her torment and slavery condition, allowing him to have her power. Or so we thought. Throughout the events of the rumbling, we see Ymir observing all the events that are happening and watches closely as anyone tries to interfere or escape from the rumbling. Even when Eren has a conversation with everyone on the plane, we don't see just Eren in kid form, but Ymir as well next to him. From that moment, both Ymir and Eren share the same body. The destruction of humanity was not just Eren's childish wish, but also Ymir's. Both of them wanted freedom and thought that a massacre was the only possible way. When Mikasa cuts Eren's head, she doesn't just kill Eren, but Ymir as well. The parasite can't have any host, Ymir as the original or Eren as the new one. Still, this is not the only reason why so many people disliked the ending. A lot of people also criticized Mikasa's and Ymir's motivation for the ending. Throughout the series, we see Mikasa having massive headaches that can be seen ever since Season 1. In one instance, Eren lies to her, telling her that the Aquaman instinct was kicking inside of her to protect a superior, which ended up being a lie. The headaches, however, were from Ymir herself. The Aquamans, as we know, do not bow to the will of the royal blood and thus cannot be turned into titans and have immense strength that seems to be a threat to the royal family. This is explained during Kenny's backstory, in which all of this information is revealed to us. Ymir, just like Eren, knew the outcome of the conflict and still tried to persuade Mikasa into having massive headaches whenever any action directly connected to Eren was about to happen. She tried to physically condition her so that she would never try to intervene in the final outcome. Now, with that said, why is this segment called More Similar Than You Think? During the conversation with Armin, Eren explains that Ymir loved the king and that's what kept her as a slave for so long. This, of course, does not really make sense, right? Well, in part yes, but on the other hand, we are forgetting that Ymir has always been a slave ever since she was a kid. She didn't know what love was and never understood what a good life was. She was needed by the king, but did she really know what love was? And the answer is yes, she did. In an alternate timeline, she understands that she did genuinely love someone, and those were his daughters, Rose, Maria, and Sheena. While contemplating her plan to destroy humanity failing, she also contemplates a different outcome in which she never sacrificed herself for the king and instead lived for her daughters, the only family she ever had. This is a contrast to Mikasa's own different timeline in which she told Eren how she felt. She would have lived with them for a couple of years, but the war would have continued. Still, this world of Attack on Titan is cruel and yet beautiful. It shows you a reality where, even though there's a lot of hostility and cruelty, there's also tenderness and love. Mikasa's role on the story isn't vague or useless. If anything, it's the most tragic one, as she is the one who is supposed to kill her beloved, the one who protected her and taught her how to be strong. Eren knew about this, and every time Mikasa tried to get close to Eren, he would push her away. He knew about her feelings, but he also had for her until the very end. Even when Mikasa tries to give him a goodbye kiss when confronted by the smiling Titan, he pushes her away, telling her, "I'll wrap that scarf around you as many times as you need." Eren refused to give up in that moment and still chose to fight even without having weapons or powers. His own stubbornness is what saved him at the beginning and doomed him at the end. And a lot of people found it disturbing to see Mikasa kissing Eren's head. And yes, it is disturbing, but it also makes sense. Think about it. Mikasa was always ready to say goodbye with a final kiss if that time were to come, just like the Smiling Titan scene. Here, there's no more fighting, no more struggle. This is the end. And Mikasa had a painful thought of Eren telling her, "I've always hated you," as the last conversation they had. She refused to say goodbye under those terms. She knew Eren was in pain and knew he couldn't do anything to stop what he was doing. Her role in the story isn't as simple as she's Eren's simp. She understands him, even at a very young age. She encourages him, takes his advice, and is willing to scold him if he's wrong. She refuses to lose her beloved and not being able to fight until the end, like she learned from Eren. She wants to save him, but understands in the end that the only way to save him is to end his suffering, but only under her own terms, not without a last kiss goodbye. May his agony end now, but let this be the last memory he has. I'll admit that the manga version had a terrible way to express Armin's feelings towards Eren's actions, so bear with me for a second here because this is purely speculation and personal view. In the manga, Eren explains to Armin the same things like in the anime, but Armin says something completely different during that conversation. Instead of saying that both of them will see each other in hell, he says, "Thank you for turning yourself into a mass murderer for our sake." Now, This is my interpretation by giving full benefit of the doubt here. Armin understood the pain Eren was going through, and even with the worst circumstances and odds against them, Eren still managed to save Eldia and the people he loved. Armin is thanking him for that. Still, my feedback is that even though this could be considered a subtext in Armin's speech, if you have to overthink to understand the emotions and thoughts of a character, then that's poor writing in my opinion. Maybe it was a translation error, I don't know. In the anime though, it is shown just like in Armin and Siggy's scene that everyone has a place and memory to go back to. Eren holds in his hand teeth, flesh and hair, showing that he was only driven by hate, massacre and lack of humanity. Armin, on the other hand, shows him the shell they found on the beach when seeing the ocean for the first time. This lets Eren understand that he was not seeking killing, he was seeking freedom, and both of them are responsible, not just Eren. Armin has said multiple times how he's not a good person and that he hates being called that. They give each other a tight hug and say goodbye for when they see each other in hell again. The anime did a much better adaptation and explanation of this scene with these changes in my opinion, and show how Armin understands the severity of Eren's circumstances. Even in his last breath, he tried to calm his friend down and allowed him to rest in peace, knowing full well that the future will rest in Armin's hands and everyone else's. Just like Mikasa kissed him showing unconditional love, Armin hugged him giving him forgiveness and eternal friendship. Eren would not pass away without knowing he was still loved. The aftermath was the last thing people complained about, and I agree up to a certain point. First, I will talk about Historia's role in the story. People kept assuming that Historia became a side character, but in reality, she was a ticking bomb. As a member of the royal family, she has to take the responsibility of giving birth to a new line of kings willing to use the power of the founding titan and terrorize the world or move forward with the execution of the rumbling. Her pregnancy meant that her child could only have two fatal choices in life: to rule as a tyrant or to carry a family burden where the kingdom could only live as stock. But none of this happened in the end. By the time the War of Heaven and Earth concludes, Historia's daughter becomes the first human to ever be born in a world without titans. A baby whose fate was meant to be a secure death sentence one way or another ended up becoming the first human to ever be born without the tyranny of the titans, the first human to truly live free. Also, this might be an interpretation of mine, but given how Historia's daughter appears just as Ymir fades, I like to assume that Ymir reincarnated into that baby, getting a second chance to finally live free. On the other hand, we see Mikasa grieving Eren as she waits for all her friends to arrive, only for a dove to appear and wrap the scarf around her, letting the readers understand that Eren was born as a bird, an animal who can roam free in the sky. Now, I get the memes and I laugh from time to time, but in a dark fantasy world like Attack on Titan, I was surprised to see how people were actually grossed about this idea. Like, they love mutilating giants who devour innocents, but draw the line with a bird. Also, if it is Eren's reincarnation, it was the best reincarnation he could possibly receive. The symbol he carried in his uniform represented the wings of freedom, and after this tragedy, he was finally able to move anywhere at any place and any time, while also letting Mikasa know that he is present no matter what. Eren might be dead in body, but always present in memory, and that's noticeable with Mikasa's passing, who kept the scarf until her last days. She lived a long life, but refused to forget the kid who saved her, the boy she grew up with, and the man she loved. Also, this is the moment that everyone mentions and hates, the destruction of Eldia's future city. Like I said at the beginning of the video, he was much better done in the anime than in the manga for reasons I already mentioned. But for the tone Attack on Titan had from the very beginning, this is the most fitting ending for this show. Eren did manage to solve Eldia and secure prosperity for his homeland. But when it comes to humanity, whether it is with or without Titans, humans are destined to fight each other. But this only happens many years later, meaning that Eldia was able to live at peace for a long time before that happened, and with that, the most infamous moment according to the haters of the ending, the new tree. In the final shot of the series, it is seen how a kid and his dog encounter the tree where Eren was buried, taking a similar shape to the one Ymir encountered and where she became the founding Titan. This leaves the ending open for speculation as the reader may contemplate the aftermath of this encounter, and a lot of people kept saying that this is just an open door for a continuation like Boruto or something like that, and it truly made me angry at one point. Think about it. What if other events like this story happened before Ymir encountered the tree? What if this is an eternal cycle doomed to be repeated over and over again? What if Eren's story was just one of many, just like Ymir's and this little boy? Just like the events in Eren's story were doomed to be repeated over and over again, war is doomed to be repeated in humanity's history over and over again. Don't you think that this was the final message, that this Titan cycle is also doomed to happen over and over again? Remember when I mentioned the Ouroboros symbol, the paradox in which you try to change certain events only for this to happen anyway, or your actions being the trigger that make them happen in real life? This is the same concept, except that they show you that this cycle isn't about just one person, one city, one world, or one entity. It applies to everything. Conclusion. Regardless of whether you liked the ending or not, there is an undeniable truth about Attack on Titan. It has become one of the most valuable and well-written pieces of fiction that we were lucky to enjoy. Today's world is filled with wars, segregation, censorship, dogma, and horrible events happening at once. And to have a fictional story like this that tackles every single one of them from multiple perspectives, forcing the reader to even question his own moral values, is a breath of fresh air. Attack on Titan tackled racism, war, xenophobia, corruption, conspiracy, genocide, seeing the world from the other's point of view and understanding the impact of atrocities that happen all around us. You love some characters, others you hated, others you forgot about them, while others left a permanent mark on you. I could be sad to feel that Attack on Titan has finally come to an end, but I could also say that I am grateful to be born in an age where I could enjoy it. Like I said before, I waited at least 10 years for this series to end, and I still think it's a spectacular work of art worthy of being admired for generations to come. And I can only be thankful to the wonderful creativity and craft of Hajime Isayama for gifting us with this piece of media. This has been Juano, and thank you for watching.